You're born in 1330 something. Not that anyone bothers to write it down. You're not royalty. You're not even interesting. You're just another mouth to feed in a village so small it doesn't have a name. Just the place near the big rock, or where the miller lives. Your father works the Lord's land. Your mother works the Lord's land. And guess what? You're going to work the Lord's land too. It's not a career path. It's a life sentence handed down from generation to generation, like a family heirloom nobody wants. By age 5, you're already pulling weeds and scaring crows. Childhood? That's a luxury invented centuries later. Here, you're just a tiny agricultural unit that eats more than it produces. Your diet is bread, and when you're lucky, more bread. Maybe some turnips if the harvest it doesn't completely tank. Meat is something you see once a year during the Lord's feast, and even then, you're gnawing on scraps the dogs wouldn't touch. Let's talk about your boss, the local lord. He's not just rich, he owns everything. The land you farm? His. The forest where you gather wood? His. The air you breathe? Technically, he hasn't figured out how to tax that yet, but give him time. You're a serf, which is basically a slave with extra steps and worse branding. You can't leave, you can't switch jobs, you can't even marry without his permission. And here's the kicker, you owe him 3 days of work every week. For free. The other 4 days, you work your own tiny plot of dirt to grow enough food so you don't starve. But wait, there's more. You also owe the church 10% of everything you produce. It's called a tithe, which is just medieval speak for mandatory donation. So let's do the math. 3 days for the Lord. 1 day's worth of food goes to the church. You're left with about 3 days of labor to feed yourself and your family. You're 14 now, officially an adult. No ceremony, no cake, just more work. You've inherited your father's job after he died from, honestly, who knows? Could have been infection from a cut, could have been bad teeth, could have been existing. You wake up before dawn because the rooster is screaming and your straw mattress feels like sleeping on a pile of angry twigs. Your house is one room, dirt floor, no windows, glasses for rich people. The whole place smells like smoke, body odor, and livestock. Because yes, you share your living quarters with animals. It's warmer that way. Breakfast is ale. Not because you're an alcoholic, but because the water will literally kill you. Medieval England's rivers are basically open sewers, so everyone, kids included, drinks weak beer for survival. You head to the fields. The work is backbreaking. You're plowing, planting, harvesting, and doing it all with tools that would make modern farmers laugh. Your plow is basically a sharp stick. Your scythe is dull because you can't afford to sharpen it. By sunset, every muscle in your body is screaming. But you can't rest. You've got to feed the pigs, fix the fence, and somehow find time to make more tools because everything you own is falling apart. You collapse into bed, and tomorrow you do it all again. This is your life, every single day, until you die, which, spoiler alert, is going to be soon. It's 1348. You're 20-ish. You've survived childhood diseases, starvation, and brutal winters. You're actually starting to think you might live to see 40, which would make you ancient by village standards. Then the rumors start. A traveling merchant mentions something about people dying in Italy. Whole cities, thousands dead. But Italy is far away, might as well be the moon. You don't think much of it. A few months later, a priest from the next village over stops by. He looks terrified. He talks about a plague sweeping through France, people dropping dead in the streets, bodies piling up faster than they can bury them. You laugh it off. Classic doomsday preacher nonsense. Then your neighbor's kid gets sick. At first, it's just a fever. The kid's mom isn't worried. Fevers happen all the time. But then the kid starts shivering so violently he can't stand. Then comes the vomiting. Then the headache so bad he's screaming. You see him 3 days later. You wish you hadn't. He's got black swellings the size of apples growing out of his neck and armpits. They're called buboes, hence bubonic plague. But you don't know that. You just know they look like something that crawled out of hell itself. The smell is ungodly, rotting flesh. Infected pus. The kid is delirious, babbling about demons. His skin is turning black in patches, like he's rotting from the inside out. He dies on the 4th day. The whole village watches them throw his body into a pit outside town because nobody wants to touch it. You tell yourself it was just bad luck, an isolated case. It's not. 2 weeks later, 6 more people are dead. Then 12. Then you lose count. The plague doesn't discriminate. Rich, poor, young, old. It takes everyone. The village priest, who spent years lecturing you about sin, is now convulsing in his own filth, covered in buboes. The Lord's family locks themselves in the manor. Doesn't matter. 3 of them die anyway. Your best friend since childhood starts coughing blood. You avoid him, not because you don't care, but because you're terrified. Everyone is. People stop visiting each other. Families lock their doors. Suspicion and paranoia replace community. You start seeing the symptoms everywhere. A woman scratching her neck. Is that a boil forming? A man coughing in the market. Is he infected? You become an expert in spotting death before it arrives. And then one morning, you wake up with a headache. At first, you try to ignore it. Just a headache. You've had those before. But by midday, you're sweating through your clothes even though it's cold outside. By evening, you're shaking so hard you can't hold a cup. Your wife looks at you with pure terror in her eyes. She knows. You know. The buboes appear on the second day. One in your armpit. It feels like a hot coal buried under your skin. You can't lift your arm without screaming. Your wife tries to help. She makes poultices from herbs, mutters prayers, even tries cutting the boil open to let out the bad blood. It doesn't work. Nothing works. You're dying, and you know it. But here's the thing. You don't die. 5 days in, the fever breaks. The buboes start to shrink. You're one of the lucky ones. About 30% of people who get the plague actually survive it. You're weak, delirious, and you've lost about 20 pounds, but you're alive. Your wife nurses you back to health, risking her own life every single day. Somehow she doesn't get sick. Some people are just immune. Nobody knows why. When you finally stagger outside 3 weeks later, the village is unrecognizable. Half the village is gone. Just gone. Houses stand empty, doors swinging in the wind. Fields are overgrown because there's nobody left to work them. The church is overflowing with bodies because the graveyard ran out of space weeks ago. The survivors are hollowed out. Not just physically, but mentally. You've watched your friends, your family, your entire community get erased. The psychological damage is something no one has words for yet. But life doesn't stop. The Lord, who miraculously survived by hiding in his manor, expects his fields worked. Crops don't plant themselves. Except now, there's a problem. There aren't enough people left to do the work. For the first time in your life, you have power. Before the plague, labor was cheap because there were too many peasants. The Lord could treat you like garbage because if you died, there were 10 people ready to take your place. Not anymore. Now, you're valuable, rare, essential. The Lord comes to you personally, something that's never happened before, and asks if you'll work his fields. You look him dead in the eye and say, "Pay me." He sputters. He threatens. He reminds you of your obligations as a serf. You shrug. Go ahead, find someone else. He can't. There is no one else. He pays you. In actual money. Suddenly, the entire feudal system is cracking. Peasants are demanding wages. Some are leaving their lords entirely and moving to other villages that offer better deals. The Black Death killed half of Europe, but it accidentally invented workers' rights. You use your new wages to buy land. Actual land. Something your grandfather couldn't even dream of. You're not rich, but you're not starving either. You can afford meat once a week. You buy your wife a new dress, not made from scratchy wool, but actual linen. Your son won't have to be a serf. The system is breaking down. Social mobility is suddenly possible. But the trauma never leaves. Every time someone coughs, you flinch. Every time you see a rat, you think about death. You've got survivor's guilt so deep it's carved into your bones. You have nightmares about the buboes, about the smell, about the mass graves, the village rebuilt. But it's not the same. There's a darkness now, a shared understanding that everything you love can be ripped away in days. The church tries to explain it. God's punishment for sin, divine judgment. You don't buy it. You saw priests die screaming just like everyone else. If this was God's plan, God has a sick sense of humor. The plague comes back. Not just once. It returns every few years like a subscription service from hell. Smaller outbreaks, but still deadly. You survive the second wave. And the third? You're in your 50s now, ancient by medieval standards, and you've buried more people than you can count. Your son doesn't make it through the fourth wave. He was 23. You bury him in the same field where you buried your father, your brother, your neighbors, your friends. You're old now, 70-something. You've outlived everyone. You own land. You've got savings. Your grandson is training to be a craftsman, something that would have been impossible before the plague. In a twisted way, the Black Death gave your family a future. It broke the feudal chains. It made labor valuable. It forced the system to change. But the cost? Half of Europe? 100 million people. An entire generation wiped out. You sit by the fire in your small house, bigger than the shack you grew up in, and you wonder, was survival worth it? You die quietly in your sleep. No drama, no boobos, just old age. Your grandson inherits your land. He'll never know the world you grew up in. He'll never be a serf. He'll never watch his entire village die in a matter of weeks. The Black Death killed millions, but it also accidentally ended the Middle Ages. It shattered the feudal system. It proved that labor had value. It sparked social change that would eventually lead to the Renaissance. But here's the thing, you didn't live through it for some grand historical purpose. You didn't suffer so future generations could prosper. You just wanted to survive. And somehow, against all odds, you did. That's the story. Not a hero's journey, not a villain's downfall. Just a peasant who lived through hell and came out the other side, broken, traumatized, and somehow still standing. That wraps it up for today. The Black Death killed between 75 and 200 million people, roughly 30 to 60% of Europe's population. It was one of the deadliest pandemics in human history, and it completely reshaped society. If this story made you think, drop a comment below.